Hi, everyone. Welcome to Seeds of Knowledge, a series dedicated to exploring timeless spiritual principles through dialogue and reflections. This series is brought to you by Solitude Center for Spiritual Living. And today's session, the co-host and co-program coordinator, Yuri, my dear friend, is here to present Invisible Influences. And I love the title, Yuri. You will come here to explore this reality, right? Which we can say it's the reality of spiritual influences, meaning perhaps the invisible as the unseen, undetected by most
Yes.
of us interactions, right, between the spiritual dimension into our more material dimension. And I know this is something, right, Yuri, that has been brought to us by in the Spirit's book really well, and they're also in other complementary works in the Spiritist body of work, the Spiritist literature. But I love, especially because it's not just that influence from two dimensions, but it's our influence, right? How we control or add to
Mm-hmm.
potential positive, potential negative. And I really, really, really can't wait to hear from you. And I hope all of you who are here with us today feel the same way. And let us know. Let us know your thoughts, if you have any additional questions, so that perhaps we can bring back to you at a different time on a follow up. Yuri, thank you so much for being here. I hope you're doing well. I will go to the backstage and you have the mic.
All right. Thank you so much. First and foremost, Marcia, my co host of the Seeds of Knowledge. It's always a pleasure, always an honor to be here talking about these topics on Spiritism. And today we have an interesting one, perhaps. It's called Invisible Influence, like you already alluded to, which is the unseen influence of the spirits. The unseen, because through the material eyes, the eyes of the flesh, we perhaps don't see it, but can spirits actually influence us from the other side of life, which is that's what it is, the other side of life. And the spirits book has this question that I think is a pivotal question in the spiritist literature, which is question 457, when Kardec asks whether the spirits can see our most secret thoughts. And the spirits are going to say they often see what you would fain hide from yourselves. Neither acts nor thoughts can be hidden from them. And I think this question is so interesting and so important because even in the question itself, I like to say that there is this sort of curiosity in the question itself because he says, can spirits see our most secret thoughts? It's interesting that the word secret is there because we could have just asked if they can see our thoughts, but Kardec was emphasizing this notion of what if I try to hide these things from the spirits? Will they would they be able to see these things nonetheless? So that's why I think the word secret is there, and their answer is as quote unquote alarming as an answer can be when they say, yeah, they often see what you would try to hide from yourselves, meaning those thoughts that we have that we don't really want to have, or the thoughts that we're not very proud of having. Those thoughts can be seen by the spirits. They can actually see our thoughts, and they say neither acts nor thoughts can be hidden from them. Meaning acts, why acts? Why are they adding the word acts there? Because Kardec asked about the thoughts. They're saying the acts as well cannot be hidden from them. Because a lot of the times when we think that we are physically alone, because we are We look around, there's nobody there. It's just us. It's never just us. So it doesn't matter if there is no incarnate spirit around me and I can do all those things that I want to hide from everybody, but there's always going to be eyes looking at me. There's always going to be spirits looking at what I'm doing and seeing what I'm seeing. And the higher the degree of elevation, that's also something we learn, the greater the ability to delve into our thoughts. So the spirits of the highest elevation that possible, they will definitely see everything as if we're projecting, like in the screen of the movie theater. We're projecting all those things, and there's all these images, all these thoughts that we even try to hide from ourselves. So the follow-up question, I guess, is not for 58, but 459 to me is a great one, because Kardec's going to ask, do spirits influence our thoughts and our actions? Meaning, okay, 457, we established that the spirits can see our most secret thoughts, and they say actually they can actually see our actions as well. So they can see our thoughts, they can see our actions. Can they influence them? Because it's one thing when we think about thoughts and actions as if somebody's observing them in a passive manner or from a passive standpoint, just as the observer. So Kardec asks very well here, okay, if they can see, can they also influence? And I think this is one of my favorites. It's hard to say that, but it is one of my favorite answers. One of the most enlightening answers, I think, from the Spirit's book, because it says their influence upon them, meaning the thoughts and the actions, is greater than you suppose. For oftentimes, or very often, it is very often they who direct both. So the influence in our thoughts and our actions is greater than we suppose. So the influence upon those things is greater than we can imagine. So whoever is listening to this, if you imagine how much you're influenced by the unseen world, double that or triple that, quadruple that, is greater than we suppose. And they actually add there, for it is very often they who direct the thoughts and the actions. That is such a key concept in Spiritism, because it tells us about this interchange or this exchange between us, the incarnated spirits, and the discarnate spirits, which in a way is spirit interacting with spirit, immortal being interacting with more immortal being. The difference lies in the fact that we are inhabiting a body, a material body, a body of flesh and blood and bones, whereas they are temporarily not. But the thing is, this communication is very natural, because it is immortal being communicating and interacting with immortal being. So the question here, or the answer to this question, is great, because we start to understand how much they influence us. So they can see our thoughts and our actions, they can influence our thoughts and our actions more than we suppose. So the other question that Kardec brings is, have we some thoughts then that originate with ourselves and others that are suggested to us? Okay, so if they do suggest, do we actually have thoughts on our own? Do we have thoughts of our own? And they're going to say, your soul is a spirit who thinks. You must have observed, this is them telling Kardec, that many thoughts, and frequently very opposite ones, coming to your mind in reference to the same subject and at the same time. In such cases, some of them are your own, some of these thoughts are your own, some are ours. This is the cause of your uncertainties, because you have thus in your mind two ideas that are opposed to each other. It's very interesting, because there's this notion here that we are a soul who thinks, so we do emanate our thoughts, we do create our thoughts, our own thoughts, but we're also very influenced. And they're saying sometimes, if you pay attention, you'll see that there are thoughts that are oftentimes very contradictory within our own minds, for good or for evil. Good thoughts or bad thoughts. Sometimes we may be in a moment where we are very much enraged perhaps, or we are extremely irritated and we're about to do something or say something that we know we're going to regret, and in that millisecond, in that half a second, whatever it may be, we have another thought that's like, no, this is not right. Don't. This is going to cause too much trouble. This could be a thought that was suggested. Same thing with the other way around as well. A lot of the times we're trying to do good. We're trying to stay vigilant. We're trying to do something, take the higher roads, do something that's good and nice, and we hear something else as well. Nah, don't do that. Don't forgive them. Why are you going to forgive them? They just hurt you. A lot of the times these thoughts are suggested. So they're saying here, when you see these big contradictions, be aware, because a lot of the times this could be the unseen influence of the spirit world. And Emmanuel, the spirit author who wrote through the hands of Chico Xavier, he's going to say in this beautiful message here that if one day we're hungry for greater hope, we must not be afraid to ask for inspiration and assistance from the beloved hearts that preceded us on the great journey, because they will be with us supporting our energies in human tasks like stars. This is beautiful. Stars in the night sky of longing, so that you know how to wait patiently for the lights of dawn. Seek them, the light of love on the wings of a prayer. He's telling us to pray. He's telling us to seek our invisible friends, the beneficent spirits, our invisible helpers through the wings of prayer. So we have this constant channel of communication open with the spirits and those who have preceded us, like he says, on the great journey beyond the grave. And we have access to them. All we have to do is elevate our thoughts. All we have to do is send them a prayer, send them something that they will be able to hear from us, and then we can connect with them and we can listen to them. We can hear them, because we do have this communication at our disposal all the time. The problem is that more often than not, we are so ingrained in our own day-to-days and the stressors and all of that we don't necessarily stop and elevate our vibrations so we can get in contact with these spirits that preceded us on the great journey, but these helpers. And he's saying, don't be afraid to ask for inspiration. Don't be afraid, if you're hungry for hope, to seek those beloved friends on the wings of a prayer by praying. And that is something that Jesus said too, the watch and pray, the famous sentence when he said, watch and pray. Watch your thoughts and your actions that come after those thoughts, obviously, and pray. Elevate our thoughts. Emmanuel, the same author, is going to say in the book Thought and Life that prayer gives a spark to the hidden energies of the heart and releases them by the living and image-forming power of thought. So the image-forming power of thoughts, and then when we pray, we are giving spark to these energies that we have already in our hearts. This desire to love and be loved, this desire to improve and to help others improve, the benevolence that we carry with us, the indulgence that we carry within us. But we must be able to watch our thoughts, especially so we can see which ones are ours and which ones are perhaps suggested. And we have to be able to be very vigilant so we know what we're doing at any point in time, if that's the best thing for us and for others in that moment or not. A lot of the times it may not be. And a lot of the times, as we learn from question 459, the answer to question 459, we are being directed, our thoughts or our actions, by the unseen influence, by the invisible influence. Emmanuel is also going to say that these images, when we're praying, They ascend to the higher spheres, touching the minds of both visible and invisible entities around us. So we're not just praying. When we're praying, we're not just effecting change in those that are the discarnate spirits, those who have already preceded us on the great journey. Where we can also effect change in those that are around us who are also visible entities, meaning even the people who are incarnated as well. And then he says, as a result of this contact, we will receive answers from the divine plane. We will always receive answers to our prayers, to elevating our thoughts, because we're always being helped. We're always being influenced. And that is something that is very key for us to understand. And as we learn also, still in the matter of prayer, in the Gospel according to Spiritism, that Kardec is going to tell us that it is not by the multiplicity of words that we will be heard, meaning our prayer will be heard, but the sincerity of them. So when we're talking about watching and praying, we're talking about elevating our thoughts in prayer so we can help others and we can get help ourselves by the sincerity of that prayer, not necessarily by the multiplicity of words, meaning how fancy my words are, how fancy my vocabulary is, how if I use difficult words to try to reach spirits that are more elevated because they're smarter. No, forget about that. If that's how you speak, great. Speak sincerely. But the reality of it is, it has to come from the heart, and it's how you are and who you are. Once that's done, the prayer will always reach the divine plane, and we will have the help that we need. In a book called Between Heaven and Earth, if I'm not mistaken, by André Luiz, and Spirit André Luiz, psychographed by Chico, there is this case of this family, and there is a lot of turmoil. I'm not going to spoil too much, but there's a lot of turmoil between the incarnate spirits and the discarded ones in that family. And this girl prays for her biological mother, who had already passed, to come help the family. But the biological mother was obsessing the stepmother. So that prayer, that vibration was so elevated, and the mother, the biological mother, was in a vibration that was much lower, it couldn't reach her directly. But there's no prayer that ever goes to waste. That little girl's prayer was what they call refracted prayer, as if we imagine the light refracting. So it went up to the helpers from the divine plane, and they sent spirits to help that situation, and of course help the mother as well, who was in such a dense vibration that she couldn't necessarily help her biological daughter, who was praying for her. And by that we start to understand and delve deeper into this idea of the unseen influence and how the spirituality works in ways that we have to pay attention to, we have to believe, and we have to make use of that too. And understanding that we are being influenced and influencing all the time. This good influence as well is also talked by the author, one of my favorite authors, Léon Denis, in this book, The Problem of Life and Destiny, when he's going to say, but he's talking about himself, I never missed the help of my invisible friends, never did my voice speak to them in vain. Since my first steps in this world, their influence has enveloped me. It is to their inspirations that I owe my best pages and my most vibrant traits. And he continues by saying, they shared my joys and sorrows, and when the storm rumbled, meaning when life got hard, I knew they were standing near me during the struggle. Look at this, pause for a second here, the depth of faith of this man, the knowledge and the certainty that he had of this invisible positive influence in his life. Without them, he's going to continue by saying, without their help, I would have had to interrupt my march and suspend my labor a long time ago. Sometimes during the retreat of the evening, or the silence of the night, their voices speak to me, cradle me, comfort me. Léon Denis here is talking about the invisible influence of his friends helping him in his journey. And he says, since my first steps in this world, he has felt this energy, this vibration, this influence from the spirits that are helping him, carrying him, helping him with inspiration all the time. And he's saying, they share my joys and my sorrows, meaning they were always there with me. As we know, we have spirits all around us, with us, in our joys and sorrows. And he says, they were standing near me during the struggle. So he knew there was always help. He knew there was always inspiration. And also, I think it's an interesting piece of this passage that it may go unnoticed a lot of the times is when he says, sometimes during the retreat of the evening or the silence of the night, their voices speak to me, cradle me, comfort me. He's talking here about this moment of, good way solitude, this moment of inner peace, this moment of when we gather ourselves and it's us and God, us and the spirits. And that's so hard to do nowadays because all the time we are sucked by so many different things trying to draw our attention that we a lot of the times miss these golden opportunities to improve, these golden moments to be able to get in contact with the spirit world. And that's when he's saying, during the retreat of the evening, so he's already telling, the silence of the night, he's already saying when he used to do that moment of introspection in a way where he would feel the spirits there with him. And that's something I invite perhaps whoever's watching this to try and think to yourself, how often am I doing this? How much time am I dedicating every week, perhaps every day even, for those who are more disciplined, to this moment of connection with the higher spirits? Each person is going to have a different answer, but I think we can always do more. Because as Emmanuel is going to say here, and I love this passage as well, he's going to say that the friends who preceded you in the spiritual homeland accompany you in the triumphs ignored by men. Those moments when we have these trials and the triumphs as well. They're ignored by men, but they're there. And bless you with the sweat of patience in the necessary struggles. They encourage you in the cause of pure love and sustain your energy so that your hope does not fade. They share your joys and pains, much like Léon Denis said, teaching you to sow happiness in others so that you reap greater happiness even. If you stumble, they stretch out their arms to you, and if you cry, they dry your tears. Look, if we stumble, they stretch the arms to us through this inspiration, through this unseen help that we all get all the time. And if we cry, they dry our tears. But above all, and I love this ending here, they wait for you, confident, when you finish the task, to hug you affectionately with the joy of someone welcoming a dear companion back home. I intentionally bolded all the verbs that relate to the help of the spirits, to the unseen influence of the good spirits. They accompany us, bless us, encourage us, sustain our energy, share our joys and pains, teach us, stretch out their arms to us, dry our tears, and wait for us in the end to hug us when we complete whatever mission we have in this earth, in this very precious time that we have. They're going to be there waiting for us to hug us, to receive us. And I think this is very beautiful and inspirational for us to realize how much help we have, even though it's quote unquote invisible, but it's not. Because it's invisible doesn't mean it's inexistent. Those are two different things. Also in the book Planetary Transition, this one by Manoel, Philomeno de Miranda, he's going to say that it is still a great challenge to do good in today's tumultuous world. It is still. However, those who dedicate themselves to the practice of charity and the exercise of doing good should not be discouraged, because if there are executioners from beyond, always willing to carry out heinous crimes, meaning those spirits that are still very much ingrained in pain, guardian angels also swarm vigilant and quick in the execution of the legitimate fraternity. We are never lonely. We are never alone, actually, because we always have the help, even though sometimes it may seem that everything is so hard, the world is so tumultuous, but we always have the help from the higher spirits in this journey. And as Léon Denis is coming back to Léon Denis, he says intuition. Remember we talked about in the Spirit's book where the spirits are going to say sometimes we have different thoughts. We have thoughts that are suggested to us. Intuition is in most cases only one of the forms used by the inhabitants of the unseen to transmit their warnings and instructions to us. Or at times it will be the revelation of deep consciousness to normal consciousness. And he says in the first case, in the case where they transmit their warnings through intuition, it can be considered as an inspiration. Through mediumship, the Spirit infuses his ideas into the understanding of the medium. And we're going to talk a little bit about mediumship, this form of communication, but he made an analogy, and I brought the image here of the analogy, but he says that the broad stretch of a river cannot flow through a narrow riverbed. Similarly, an inspiring spirit will succeed in transmitting through the organism of the medium only those of its conceptions which find an adequate mediumistic outlet. Meaning, if the narrow stretch of the river, it's our mediumistic abilities, let's call it, we may have all of that inspiration, all that knowledge, everything that's going to be suggested to us, but we're only going to be able to get this much influence and express as well that influence if our riverbed is very narrow. And Léon Denis is also going to say, each of us, if we wanted, could communicate at any time. We're all spirits, he says, in the same book. But the thing is, we're sometimes like the narrow riverbed. And in the book, The Consoler, I like to bring many bibliographies so we can learn through many different sources and authors. This one written by Emmanuel, he's going to say, they're going to ask, is it accurate to consider all human beings as mediums? All the people, he's going to say, regardless of the evolutionary level, demonstrate some degree of mediumship. This attribute of the Spirit represents the dawning of new perceptions for the beings of the future, when they will not notice the expansion of the narrow window of their five senses as a result of the advancement of the world view. Therefore, it's this expansion in a way of the faculties which go way beyond the five senses. There are still the senses, these five senses, they are still very rudimentary when we think about all of the accomplishments of the Spirit that the Spirit will one day have. So if we're judging everything by what our fleshly ears or fleshly eye, can see and hear, we're losing a large amount of information and knowledge there. So if we're all mediums to some degree or not, to some degree or other, what is the greatest need for mediums then? What do we need to do? The first need is to educate themselves in the gospel before committing to major spiritist tasks, or they risk bumping into the specter of individualism at the expense of their mission. Education, studying, discipline, inner transformation, all those things are going to be important, because in the end, if the medium is an instrument, for those of us who already do this task, or those of us who want to do this task, we need to be the best instrument we can be. So we need to study, we need to do the inner transformation, to know ourselves, to look inward, so forth and so on. Can mediums disregard the studies and count only on their spiritual guides for all their needs? It's a very interesting question, because yes, if I have a great guide, let's say, can I just not do anything and they tell me everything? The answer is perhaps a bit obvious, but I wanted to put it here anyways. It says, as dedicated and as evolved as dedicated and evolved as they may be, the guides, discarded mentors can neither restrain the will nor eliminate essential struggles from mediums' lives, because it is through these difficulties that human beings redeem their criminal obscure past and acquire new merits. If a medium expects a great deal from their mentors, it is only fair that their mentors expect a great deal of effort from the medium in return. In other words, laziness, idleness are not our allies in this journey. We must be able to practice the mediumship, or be able to count on our mentors, but not to do everything for us, because the practice of expecting, Emmanuel is going to say this as well, the practice of expecting everything from a mentor can turn into, he says, a detestable habit and compromise the precious potential of the soul. We can't just rely on the spirit influence, on the invisible influence, to eliminate our struggles, because we evolve through the struggles. The spirit mentors will be there to help us, but they cannot just read us from all the pain and not let us do have the effort or put in the work to improve. So help, and this is from another book, says help from the invisible realm is incontestable and unfailing in its multiform expressions when the time is right. Sometimes it's not the right time, and we think it's the right time, but it's not. It is essential that believers do not get accustomed to this type of collaboration, that they learn to walk by themselves. Again, very much in line with the previous slide, with the previous message. Convinced that they are in the world in order to learn, and that they are not allowed to ask their instructors to solve the problems that are necessary in their positions as students. And I bolded the multiform expressions when the time is right, that sentence, because to me it jumps out. It's this notion that we receive help many times in ways that we don't even realize. But we're always receiving the help. And also we must learn to walk by ourselves, as it says there, because the spiritual evolution is this thing that is individual, and it's also non-transferable. We cannot transfer to our spirit guides our evolution, our path forward. And when we talk about invisible influence, I think we have to also talk about the negative one. And for this, I'm going to go to the Spirits book, question 469, when they ask, by what means can we neutralize the influence of evil spirits? Well, if we're influenced by all types of spirits, how can we neutralize the influence of the evil ones? And they're going to say, by doing only what is right and putting all your trust in God, you repel the influence of inferior spirits and prevent them from obtaining power over you. Take care not to listen to the suggestions of spirits who inspire you with evil thoughts, stir up discord among you, and exciting you evil passions, which, as we may already realize, it's the most obvious trajectory perhaps. If I'm having very evil tendencies and stuff, yeah, it might be an influence, a negative influence, and I'm not going to follow that. But this is also a great answer, because they're going to say, distrust especially those who flatter your pride, for in doing so, they attack you on your weakest side. This is why Jesus makes you say in the Lord's Prayer, let us not succumb to temptation, but deliver us from evil. So there will be those evil spirits, the negative influences that will flatter our pride. So we must think, oh, this is such a nice thought that somebody's suggesting, but if that's, we have to look at how we're thinking in that moment, because it may actually be a negative influence trying to make our pride go like a balloon, inflate like a balloon, And that is very, very dangerous. So pride and selfishness, as we know, the two scourges of our moral development. In these cases of spiritual obsession, we learn that those who dedicate themselves to the task of curing obsessions need to consider, first of all, the need for inner illumination of the disturbed medium, because the cure itself lies in their spiritual education. The need to discipline ourselves. The need to become disciplined instruments. That's why the theme of today, I wanted to put the name invisible influence, not invisible help or invisible aid only, because we must talk about this negative influence. The obsessed person who gives his body without moral resistance to ignorant and disturbed entities is like the artist who gives his precious violin to a malefactor. Meaning, if we're all mediums, if we're all influenced by spirits, if they can see our thoughts, they can influence our thoughts and our actions. And we're not offering any resistance to that. We're like, he's saying it, we're like the artist or the musician who has this precious violin and is just giving that violin to somebody who they know is going to take very bad care of it. He's going to destroy it. He's going to do all these wrong things. And why are we doing that? So it calls for responsibility. It calls for this notion that we must be mindful and we must be vigilant. That's the theme. Vigilant with our thoughts. Vigilant to be able to understand when is it that I'm being influenced and when is it that is actually coming from me. Which one should I follow? What's the right one? Because these processes, of obsession, they can last centuries. We have a book, One Psychograph by Ivone Pereira, where we have a case of obsession that lasted for 4 centuries, over 4 centuries. And the spirits who were obsessing the other ones were actually influencing them in a way that was so strong and so negative that 2 people actually took their own lives. So it is extremely important for us to realize that. But as we said as well, nobody's ever alone. We are never alone. And this spirit Charles, through the hands of Yvonne, he's going to say that a human creature will never be so miserable and devoid of the sympathies of the invisible plane that it will no longer have a handful of disinterested and loyal friends ready to help it on a fair occasion. Many of these will be affections conquered over the course of previous lives, others missionaries to whom it was entrusted for the work of progress by the supreme power of the universe. Nobody is so evil that they are devoid, and so miserable that they are devoid of spirits who want to help them. Nobody. Because our God is a God of infinite love and mercy. And then Charles here is saying that a lot of the times it's going to be these affections that were conquered, or these bonds that were created in previous lives. But other times it's going to be missionaries to whom it was entrusted for the work of progress by the supreme power of the universe. Meaning sometimes it's going to be spirits who are missionaries, spirits who don't necessarily perhaps know that person from before, but they are good spirits and they want to improve it. They want to help others. So they're there to help. So it doesn't matter what we have done, doesn't matter what any spirit we can think of has done. They have spirit benefactors, be it people who they have already known, or be it those who are missionaries, who are always ready to jump in and help them and influence their thoughts, influence their actions. The high-ranking spiritual guides can do so much, and that's something that Saint Augustine in the Spirit's book, he's gonna tell us. He's gonna tell us not to fear to bother the higher spirits with questions or with pleas for help. He says, do not fear to weary us with your questions. He says, remain on the contrary, always in connection with us. Let us not shy away from asking for help, from praying, from elevating our thoughts, from elevating our vibration and our feelings, so we can get in contact with the spirits, already knowing now that we studied all of this, that we are constantly influenced. He says, you will thus be stronger and happier if we maintain this connection with the higher spirits. And he's going to add something that I thought to bring here, because it's an interesting piece. He says, those who may think it impossible that spirits of a high degree should bind themselves to a task so laborious and demanding so much patience on their part, we reply that we influence your souls while at many millions of leagues from you. They can influence us if we ask for Jesus, if we ask for whatever spirit we can think of. When we have the prayer, when we elevate our thoughts, we can reach those spirits. And he says to us, space is nothing. And while living in another world, our spirits preserve, that's what he's saying. Even if they're living in another world, our spirits preserve their connection with yours. We possess qualities of which you can form no idea. But be sure that God has not imposed upon us a task above our strength, and that he has not abandoned you upon the earth without friends and without support. I think this is very reassuring for us to understand that the invisible influence is always here, it's always there, it's ubiquitous. The influence of the spirits is everywhere. But whenever we elevate our thoughts in prayer, whenever we try to reach for these mentors, these spirit guides, we will reach them. They will hear us. They will help us in the way that they can help us, which a lot of the times is not in the way that we want necessarily, because more often than not, we don't know what's best for us. We want to get rid of the pain. We want to get the easier path ahead, and we pray for that. If that's not the case, we're not going to get it. But remembering that God is infinite love. God is fair. And he's saying here that they have powers, the spirits who already ascended in the spiritual evolution or the spiritual ladder, They have powers we can form no idea, meaning they can be living in other worlds and still maintain this connection and still help us if we let ourselves be helped, if we elevate our thoughts and our vibrations. And he also said something that's interesting at the end there, where he says, be sure that God has not imposed upon us a task above our strength. So instead of us thinking sometimes, I'm not going to bother my spiritual guide or my mentors or all the spirit friends that I have around me because I'm going through so much and it's so hard and poor guys. No, I'm not going to do that. He says, he has not abandoned you. God has never imposed a task that somebody cannot take. Otherwise, it would be an unfair and it would be injustice. And what sort of God is that? That's not the God that we have. He has not abandoned you upon the earth without friends and without support. We always have that influence. We always have those friends. We always have the support, but we must understand how we're always connected with the other side of life, with the spirits, how they influence us, how we influence them as well. And there's this constant interchange of feelings, of thoughts, of actions, and we always have these spirits that are so ready to help us if we let ourselves be influenced for good. Because if we keep following the evil passions, if we keep dwelling in pain and just suffering because we're imposing that on us, we're going to be influenced as well, but by those who are in the same vibrational load. So may we think about Jesus. May we think about all the spirits that help us and use this knowledge to our own benefit, use this knowledge to help us and help others, understanding how the unseen influence or the invisible influence is very much existent. So it's invisible, not in existence. And then we can connect with the higher spirits, connect with Jesus, our master, our mentor, all the time, watching and praying. And that's what I had today. And I want everyone to have a very blessed week whenever you're listening to this and wherever you are.
Hey there. Thank you so much. I love the topic, but I want to maybe, Yuri, do a couple of inquisitive thought process. Are you okay?
Yeah, of course.
Because this is really an interesting topic, which is the idea that we are not alone, number one, right? That we have those influences that can come also from within to attract, etc. But I was thinking completely outside of your lecture, but based on that, Hollywood somehow created, and Hollywood is more tangible for us to think about, has created this whole horror tradition about those influence. Do you agree with that?
Yes, because that's what sells.
That's what sells, and it's okay, right? So, because I'm thinking what we want to, you're bringing here, of course, the idea of almost this co-creation, right? How life is this beautiful collaborative um, execution of ideas where our human minds and experience commingle with higher minds, and it's hard for us many times, as you mentioned, to differentiate. But then when we watch a movie, it's really an external coming in. So I just thought, two movies that maybe we can talk about for just a minute or two. And I don't know if you have seen it because this is completely impromptu, Yuri, but have you seen Inception? It was,
Yes, I love
right?
Christopher Nolan. Yeah, the dream within a
Yes,
dream. Yes.
with dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. And the idea is that if you have an inception of an idea
Mm-hmm.
at the
Mm-hmm.
lowest level, it percolates up and you lose sight of reality. But I just thought about how that, even though it's not a spiritual movie by any means, how can that illustrate what you're talking about in terms of our vigilance
Oh,
toward,
yes.
right, ideas that are may not be ours, but we allow it to influence at a deep, deep, deep level.
Yes, the author Emmanuel also says, like we are responsible for what we are creating, be it good or bad. Like we're what we
Yeah.
are maintaining. He says that as well. So I like the analogy with the Inception movie because a lot of the times these
Mm.
ideas, these negative ideas that are suggested to us, they will come in the forms of seeds. They're not
Yes.
gonna come in the form of something so blatant that we can be like, wait, that's not
I,
my
I
thought.
recognize
I
that.
would
I
never do
recognize
that.
it. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I recognize this. Guys are not gonna get me, But it's
Yeah.
gonna come through almost like a sprinkle of seeds, and then all of a sudden that
Yeah.
thing is growing because I'm not vigilant enough, and I'm maintaining, and that seed is sprouting and becomes a plant, and all
Yeah.
of a sudden I don't even know if that was from me or if that was suggested. But a
Yeah.
lot of the times it is suggested, but if we are invigilant,
Yeah.
we're not
Yeah.
able to differentiate or cut the roots.
Yeah. No, I just thought it was interesting, and even in the fantasy genre, right? Lord of the Rings, right, where Gollum falls for the influence of the ring and and its obsession, right? This to me, I thought it was like, oh, I was just thinking, how can, in this case, for us, how can we be aware of certain things that can lead us to either obsession, to be vulnerable, but also to be fall prey to obsessive desires. Do you know what I mean? How vulnerable we are if we don't know how to create a quote unquote a shield against
Mm-hmm.
those influences that are negative. And to do this, I am just, you were talking and I was thinking so many different things, Yuri, so forgive me. But my final thought is how do we know this if it's mine or it's not, which is self-discovery, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
this constant exercise, of course, of prayer, as you mentioned, but also as understanding who am I, and I'm talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, right?
Oh
If
yeah.
if if I have, within me all the challenges and issues, don't repress it. Let's bring it up so that if it keeps populating my thoughts, I can get right. Yes, it's me. So let's
Mm-hmm.
deal with that in a way that's not going to push us down, right?
Question Answer to question 919 of the Spirit's book, Know Thyself.
Yeah,
Is exactly what
yeah,
you said. So like the
yeah,
more we know ourselves, the more we can create, like you said, these shields and understand that what is it that I'm most susceptible of falling prey to. So if it's
yeah,
pride, be assured that there were going to be spirits who
yeah,
will try to make my pride go like a balloon, like I said. If it's
yeah,
selfishness, there will be those spirits sprinkling the seeds of like, this is yours, don't share it. You
yeah.
work so hard for that. Why are you gonna share that? They're going to try and get through us in the
Yeah,
ways that we have our weaknesses. But if we don't know our weaknesses, or if we are arrogant enough to think we don't have weaknesses, then
then
that's a weakness too, because
yeah,
it
yeah,
and they're going to explore that. So the more we know ourselves, the
yeah,
more we're going to be able to filter out the thoughts that are not ours, or those who are suggested from, let's call it,
yeah,
using the same terminology, an evil
yes,
spirit,
yeah,
and praying.
yeah.
Always resorting to pray to elevate our thoughts, especially in the difficult moments.
Yeah, which is hard, right? Because those difficult
Absolutely.
moments, we need help, but we need to help ourselves first. And I think just my final thought here on this topic, which is uh, resonance, right? As you're talking, there's a resonance with the wavelength of the things
Yes.
that speak to us. So, and this is really interesting. But if we start a friendship, it's usually anyone. It can be first day of school or college, or first day in a work environment, a new work environment, and you don't know anybody, but immediately you start to have that resonance to the people that maybe
Yeah.
look like you, think like you, or behave like you. But there's
Hmm.
that other one, which is that resonance that have the same energy, right, of you, and you gravitate to those. So let's be aware of it so that we can be attracted and or attract those that we want to be around, right?
Absolutely.
Physically or
Unseen or not,
spiritually.
invisible or
Yes,
not. Yes.
yes, yes, absolutely. Anyways, I just thought I would pop in with some
I like
questions
that.
at the
Yeah.
end. And um, do you want to have any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Guess the final thought is the whole message of the talk is to be mindful, to be aware of the
Yeah,
influence that we receive and how we influence others,
yeah,
invisible or not, as we talked about. So always being vigilant, knowing yourself, and praying. So watch and pray.
yes, yes. Thank you so much, Yuri. I know we are
Thank you,
in this
Marcia.
coordination of this series of talks together. So I hope to see you next time. Reverse of roles, right? But I really appreciate it,
Yes.
Yuri.
Appreciate
Bye,
it, Marcia.
everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye,
All
everyone.
right. Bye. Thanks.